It begins and ends exactly like it says in my name. S2S stands for seed to sale.
Okay.
So we can provide comprehensive coverage options from the moment that the business puts that seed into the ground, or like from from whatever it starts growing, and then we can cover that product, that company, that business, that entity up until it goes across the counter to the end user.
Welcome to Canned Heat. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Dojo Master and Chief Strategist for Liger Partners. We are specially skilled for marketing and operations and do strategy, brand, and execution. Today, I am joined by David Rahn. He is with S2S Specialty Risk Insurance. Did I get all that right?
Yeah, you got it right.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about what S2S does. It's an interesting category that not a lot of people, I think more people are focusing on it, but it's not going to be one that's just common.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked that question because, when people ask me, especially when I'm in a social situation or meeting new people or networking, I always like to say I'm an insurance broker, risk insurance broker, who deals primarily in the recreational medicinal cannabis industry in North America.
Got it. So you go from the thing where they're like, oh no, he's an insurance broker to, tell me more. Tell me more.
It's like, oh, he's just an insurance guy. Oh, he probably just deals with life insurance or auto insurance or something like that. Insurance industry is so broad nowadays that you can really get niche into specific industries. So that's where I really love to set myself apart from the rest of the insurance.
Very nice.
Yeah, I really just deal with cannabis and hemp.
And so tell me how did you get into that? So what did you do before, or has this always been what you focused on, which I don't.
So this isn't actually what I've always been focused on. This is actually, I'm going into roughly my fourth year going into this. Before that, I was working at a luggage startup based out of Los Angeles. And before that, I was doing fashion and PR marketing for Worth Avenue up in Palm Beach, Florida, which is like the East Coast version of Rodeo Drive, if you will.
Okay, got it. And so did you say a luggage startup?
Yep, luggage. It was a company called Giro,
Okay.
G-RO.
That's not the ones that had like the big wheels on it, was it?
That's exactly the one. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, too many. I do most of my shopping through Instagram ads, so I'm sure that I
Very
saw
cool.
that a couple of
Yeah.
times.
I was tasked with making sure the first phase of all the bags get out to where they need to be. It was about 70 different countries
Oh wow.
bags were shipped out to, on top of handling the logistics uh, and customer service as well.
Well, that's surprising background because I thought what you were going to tell me is that you were a traditional insurance broker of some sort, and that you decided that you saw this coming wave and you were going to niche your business down. But this feels like even a new thing for you from a venture perspective.
Yeah, no, especially what can I say? I've my father's footsteps. He's an entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur as well. So it's definitely being passed down. And I actually work with my dad in the industry.
Okay.
He's my partner in the company.
Oh, nice. So when you talk about this, and people don't often think about insurance being that segmented or niche, and it really is. We work with a lot of different companies that cover almost anything and everything that you would imagine. What is
Mm-hmm.
what is the kind of, where does your coverage begin and end for a
So
company that's in this
another
space?
really great question. It begins and ends exactly like it says in my name. S2S stands for seed to sale.
Okay.
So we can provide comprehensive coverage options from the moment that the business puts that seed into the ground, or slice from from whatever, it starts growing, and then we can cover that product, that company, that business, that entity up until it goes across the counter to the end user, through a transaction at the dispensary,
And so
or on.
is that a combination of lots of different products? Because it sounds like one of those would be maybe around, if there's
So
going
it's
to
a
be
lot of different products, everything from specialty insurance, general liability insurance, workers' compensation. We can cover dispensary employees, the processors who work, the cultivators in the fields, everybody who touches that plant or who doesn't touch that plant, we can provide insurance coverage for.
Okay. And in this space, is this insurance something that these companies know that they want, so they're buying it for that reason, or are they buying it because they have to? Because sometimes insurance is purchased, on either side of the coin, right? It's like, oh, I want to make sure I'm protecting my investment versus I'm going to the bank and the bank says I got to have this insurance or I've got to do this in order to move to the next step.
So yeah, so since as it stands in the United States of America, let's talk about how cannabis operates in the U.S., because that's where the bread and butter of my business is each state has their own guidelines, laws, and regulations covering either medicinal or recreational cannabis. It's not federally legal.
Right.
It's still a federally Schedule One drug, but certain states allow both medicinal and or recreational cannabis to be sold in their states, and they also regulate the requirements as well, because the insurance is also a regulated industry in itself as well.
Okay.
And that is also regulated on the state level as well.
Okay. So that's tied together. So if they're
right.
Yeah.
So with that being said, certain states have certain minimum insurance requirements that businesses do need to get, whether it's part of the licensing or just part of, let alone operating as the business once you're fully licensed.
Okay. All right. So tell me, we're talking canned heat, we're looking at like marketing and talking about kind of how you get something out there. You deciding to get into this space, was this something that you just saw that people were searching for and there wasn't a lot of providers in it, or what was the decision to get there?
So the decision was, we were still starting to see this action becoming much more, the risk exposure since 2014 on the West Coast, especially in Oregon, California, Colorado, and Washington, and then soon Nevada. They were really the big players in the insurance market. No, I'm sorry, in the cannabis industry.
Right.
Because everything is done within their states. Nothing is coming from, an outside state. It's all done within state. They're purchasing, high value processing equipment, whether it be for extraction, whether it just be for plain processing, for agricultural processing, or lab equipment. Some of this equipment costs, well up into the millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
And in case something happens to it, they don't want to get their business interrupted.
Yeah.
So they need some sort of indemnification or some sort of defense to prevent against those risks.
Got it.
So it really all started with one company that, as it was scaling in the Oregon market, became exposed to more risks. And we were able to find and go into specialty insurance markets, and find them the coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's an important point because you talk about it and it's kind of got this mystique around it because it's only legal in certain places in certain states. But really, at the end of the day, it's a plant that gets put in the ground, and so anything that you'd worry about or think about in a plant that needs to be taken out of the ground and processed would be the same. But I assume, because I work with some like payment processors too that are very anti, they won't deal in this space at all. Is that what you find in the insurance space? Is that there's some that just kind of stay away from this as an overall?
Yeah, I mean, just like with any other sort of business that has pivoted into this industry, there are always risks involved.
Yeah.
There are risks that can fully interrupt your business.
Yes, I guess the question that I'm curious about though is that are there insurance companies that are more like there's some that will touch it. There's some like payment processors who are like will not deal with it at all,
Exactly.
and then some that are like,
So
yeah, it's totally cool. We're good to work in that area, but we'll
yeah,
just
so
charge you more for it.
I operate in what's called the surplus line market of
Okay.
insurance.
Yep.
And those are the sort of companies that aren't your progressives or your state farms or your pedestrian carriers that you're going to find on the street that can insure your home, automobile, or provide you health benefit coverage or things like that.
Yep. Okay.
Um, these are still, companies that operate and are regulated, but they don't necessarily follow the federal guidelines. A lot of these companies that your progressives and your state farms follow the federal guidelines because they operate in all 50 states.
Yeah. Okay.
They don't want to go against the letter of the law. At
Right.
this time, at this point in time, things can definitely change.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and so then my question with, you starting this and putting it together was if you think about marketing and getting your name out there and letting people know that you were doing this, was it a challenge to find the customers? Was it more of a challenge to find the product? Like where did you, or was it you just opened the doors and people are like, thank goodness there's someone who's providing this type of service?
So it's at first, it really wasn't a challenge of finding the customer because I knew customers were going to be attracted to the services that I provide, just like if I was a lawyer or if I was an accountant or if I was a banker.
Right.
Um, what I really needed to do and take it upon myself is to put myself in front of those people in the industry. So what I did is I started from the top and I tried to trickle my way down to the bottom. I
Okay.
tried to see what was going on the national level.
Yeah.
In the national level, kind of parallels with the cannabis industry as there are multi-state operators out there. There are companies out there that operate and have the same brand just in different states.
Yep.
So I wanted to get my face in front of those people, the key decision makers in that area. And that's why I joined and became a member of the NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association.
Okay. Yep.
Um, they are one of the largest political action committees and lobbying groups for the cannabis industry right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I
They,
went to a conference a year or so ago up in DC, and I don't remember which group it was that
I'm
put that.
sorry.
I went to a conference up in DC like a year or so ago, and I'm trying to remember which group put it together, but it was something along those lines of like a lobbying group of some
Yeah,
sort.
it
Yeah.
could have been at the NCIA, and they host annual lobby days on the Hill.
Yeah.
They provide conventions both on the East Coast and the West Coast. They were really a great spot. And then there were other media organizations putting on events and putting on trade shows like Ann Hall and Ventures with MJ Biz Daily and MJ BizCon.
Yeah.
Uh, High Times Media is now focusing on more business to business events and networking and things like that. And so once I came from the national level, I wanted to get on certain state levels. Uh, Thankfully, I live in a state that recognizes medical marijuana.
Right. Yep.
So we have our own regional organization, which I also belong to, called CLAB, which stands for Cannabis Lawyers, Accountants, and Businessmen.
Okay.
Um, and it's just great networking to find those state operators as well.
Yep.
And then as far as how I operate and try to get myself out there on day to day, there's a great resource called Cannabis Media, which is constantly tracking all of the licenses and if they're pending, if they're awaiting approval, things like that. So having that as a resource gives me a better focus of which states I really need to target, how many people in those states, if they're cultivators, if they're processors, distributors, or retailers or wholesalers, and their scale and what they need to do that license I work with people who are, at the beginning of getting their license, already have their license, or have already been in this industry for a few years and are looking to scale and looking to diversify and expand.
Very nice. Well, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about maybe some pitfalls and things that people need to consider in this category. So I'm sure that you've seen some of that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to get you to answer our marketing. We've got our kind of lightning round questions. So some 3 questions we ask everybody. So we'll be back in just a second. We're talking today with David Rahn. He's with S2S Insurance Specialists. You're listening to Canned Heat. We'll be back in just a second. And we're back. You're listening to Canned Heat. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Dojo Master and Chief Strategist for Liger Partners. We are bred for our special skills in marketing and operations. We're brand strategy and execution specialists. Talking today with David Rahn. He is with S2S Insurance Specialists, and they are very much specialists. They focus specifically in the medicinal and recreational marijuana category, which is really a cool kind of niche. It's one that's kind of up and coming. But what we've learned, I think, in that first segment is there's a lot of things that are common to any other kind of, plant I might be planting or need to process or think about. One of the questions that I had for you is around, the category of when someone's starting to market it. So like there's a company out there and they've decided to grow medicinal marijuana or recreational marijuana, and they want to differentiate themselves. So they're starting to market themselves. Are you seeing any patterns or trends there? Is everybody pretty generically just saying this is what it is? Or are they making any claims about it? Or how does that kind of work?
So that's usually something that the dispensary kind of, does at the end of the day, depending on the state. I mean, dispensaries that I walk into always have tiered pricing of different strains and different products. And that's usually just based off of lab testing.
Okay.
So what really does differentiate certain brands from others and certain strains from others is their lab results. And that's something that I also focus on is, things like potency, how it was grown, and what it was used to make that final product it is right now, and if it's safe. So that is definitely one of the biggest ways you can differentiate yourself is, having top tier, top notch product backed by a reputable state lab.
Got it.
That's what I see right now. As far as that, there are some brands, there are some products who, even before this industry was formally recognized, have been focusing on certain strains and certain genetics for years and trying to create the best possible plant that they could, give out to the masses.
That makes a lot of sense. That reminds me a lot of kind of like maybe the wine industry. So like you grow the grapes
Exactly.
and then the percentage of alcohol is one thing versus another, but that's all based on after you get done, like what did it look like and how did it work? So it's either true or not true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like how wine vintages are definitely revered by certain collectors in certain regions and things like that. If you were to ask me this question in 10 years, I would have a completely different answer. And that would probably parallel something more towards like wine or exotic automobiles or things like that, or designer handbags, things like that. Everybody's then going to have, their recognition, their preference, what they want to collect and what they really want to hold on to as far as the brand is concerned.
Yeah. Okay. And so you've answered a little bit of the question about how you get how you get out there. So you're going through the industry and you're looking at kind of trade magazines, which makes a lot of sense. Just in general, just out of curiosity, a question that we ask everybody is, what's one of your favorite either brands or advertising campaigns? And it doesn't have to be within the industry. It can be anything that you think is a great brand.
One of
or
my
advertising
favorite
campaign.
brands I would have to say one of my favorite brands of all time, just because, you know, their concept and their tone and just the way they do it is always top notch and, you know, is always on top, um, is Ralph Lauren.
Got it.
I mean, ever since the start, I mean, that has always been such a brand that is offered to everybody and is available to everybody, but experienced at a level of grandeur that parallels with it, if you will.
Yeah, and
It's
they've been
like,
very true to their brand. You know, you've seen some other
exactly.
brands that,
And I really stick with brands that are true to their brands, you
yeah,
know, like Polo and like Ralph Lauren.
yeah, they haven't changed kind of the way they approach it. Because you'll see some brands that go through a re-engineering. You know, once they've been a
Yeah,
brand like that, they decide to either make themselves, you know, more common or funny or approachable, and you don't ever see them do that. So that's a
that and any absolute print ad. Well,
yes.
I'm an advertising major. I did a whole project on just on absolute alone in liquor advertising, and
Yeah,
it's always something that has spoken to me.
yeah, I read an article and I shared it over social media or something recently, and they talked about the 5 best advertising campaigns ever, and that was the number one. That one was the first they listed, and they talked about the copywriter and the graphics guy were in a room together going through trying to figure out how to like make that work, and the original graphics guy wrote absolutely the best vodka or something, and then the copywriter was like, why don't we just call it absolute vodka? You know, like that whole thing of how they came up with that. And then they were able to play that really
And then
well.
just write the whole story on the bottle. You're done, and you're now an iconoclast.
I know. And that shows
Very
you, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be tough. It can be very simple. Like the advertising, the
right.
simpler, the
Simplicity
easier
at
it
its
comes.
best.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So we've been talking today with David Rahn. He is with S2S Specialty Insurance, and they focus specifically
S2S Insurance Specialists.
S2S Insurance Specialists. I keep trying to rename your company. Sorry about that. We'll put all the information in our show notes so you can go find information on him. And thank you for listening to Canned Heat. I've been Eric Holtzclaw, Dojo Master and Chief Strategist for Liger Partners.